In this lecture series, we're going to discuss what is design. Okay, so what is design, right? In order for us to ask you to do design, we first have to define what it is. And it's really important up front to establish expectations and parameters so that you understand what it is that you're being asked to do. Okay, so there is a dictionary definition for design, and a lot of faculty like to start there. I find that dictionary definitions are great, but we're going to break it down into exactly what this program expects from you. Because design is a very broad term that can mean a lot of things. And what we do as building designers is very different in some cases than what someone who designs cars or who designs brochures does. So for our intents and purposes, our design is a deliberate act with a purposeful and deliberate intention to create something new. Emphasis, as you see, on the word deliberate. And that is because design is done on purpose. I'm not going to say that you can't do design on accident, because I actually have done some things on accident and it kind of turned out nice. But I will say that it was still in the process of attempting to do design by someone who is a lifelong designer that it happened, and therefore it was purposeful, if not deliberate. Design includes the application of the principles and elements of design, and we're really going to get into what those are, because you're going to not only learn them, you're going to be expected to apply them to everything you do in this program and everything you do in this industry. So objects of design are products and services which interface with people rather than machines or systems. Now, it's not to say that objects of design don't fit that in other fields. In ours, we are mostly interacting with people. There are some aspects of our industry that interact with machines or systems, and we will be talking about some of those systems when we get to the plumbing HVAC course. Improving the human experience is the general objective of design. And obviously that makes it a very optimistic thing. We are positively finding solutions to problems. We're trying to make the human life better. And where else is that more important than in somebody's home? And this also applies to work environments. I have designed office commercial architecture where ergonomics actually greatly impacts productivity. We're going to talk about ergonomics as part of this course, and so that you understand how the layout of appliances in a kitchen, for example, make the difference between an efficient kitchen that is a positive cooking environment as opposed to one that's hard to use. And most of us have tried to cook in a kitchen that is inefficient and not designed well, to understand why these things are important and why they require a designer. Each instance of design effort is focused on solving a specified problem in human experience. And we can break that down into rooms, right? From the minute you walk in the building, how do you know where the entrance to the building is? This is something I'm huge on as somebody who spent most of my career designing buildings that I felt should wayfind themselves. And by that I mean, I don't think you should have a big sign, here's the front door. I think it should be obvious. I think you should use the principles and elements of design to guide people, to make their experience clear. What is the path to that front door? How do you get there? That is, to me, is just as important as the front door itself, as is the facade, as is everything else. And so we're going to talk about how you consider those things. You all have been asked to get a copy of the Student Graphic Standards book, and you will see, you can see it on your syllabus as one of the required texts for this course. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you it is the required text in every course moving forward. And it's because some really detail-oriented people, very patient, put together a lot of this information for us. They went ahead and said, what does a person in a wheelchair need to do in a room to be able to navigate it comfortably? And as you know, the ADA was adopted in 1990. It is the law. We are required to include it in new construction. It becomes for DeKalb County, whenever you do renovation, you may also have to include it. It depends on each ordinance, how they expect you to, depending on the renovation, how much you have to apply. And that changes every year because it's a law. And so as the ADA learns, it grows. And so we learn these things, and graphic standards offers us a lot of research, and it's presented visually so that we know how to take that information and incorporate it into our designs. It's very valuable. It's something, you will use in every course and beyond. So that will help us not have to go figure all that stuff out ourselves, because it's a lot of research put into that. Okay, there's something called Gestalt. It's a German word, and it is the basis for the principles and elements of design. I know that people say art and design are subjective, and they're not. They're based in science. What is subjective is whether or not you like them. That's the part that's subjective. But whether or not it's good art, it's good design, that's not. We can measure those things, and anything that's measurable is science. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Gestalt, what it is, and how it applies to the principles and elements of design, so that you'll understand why you're studying it. And because I personally find that when I'm learning something, if I can understand why I'm learning it, it helps it stick better. And I think that that's true for a lot of people, that students who learn something without knowing why don't value its importance. And so understanding the basis for principles and elements of design, which is based in psychology, which is science, will help you understand why you're doing these things. So for instance, when we look at a building or anything complex, we see the whole before we see the individual parts that make up a whole. For an example, we see a person walking towards us. We see a person before we see eyes. We see a person before we see legs. We see a person before we see hair. And that is actually what Gestalt means. It means shape or form as a big picture. And so you will see the example on the right here. When you first look at this poster and you notice the image on the poster, you immediately see the weapon. And then your eyes go to the parts. Then you begin to see that these aren't necessarily just holes, but they're speech bubbles. And then you begin to see that this part and the lower part isn't just another hole, it's shaped like a profile of a face. And then when you begin to look at this, you begin to see the parts and pieces. And that is exactly what we mean when we start talking about Gestalt. Some more examples over here. It is psychology. A psychologist has founded this, and over the years it's been refined by other authors. And as I said, this is the basis for where we start saying that principles and elements of design, this is where they come from. This is their foundation. And so essentially what happened was Wertheimer, I'm not sure I'm saying that right, my German's terrible. He noticed, if you look at, and I know you guys have seen lights on a Christmas tree, he noticed that the lights blink in a succession down the row. And they're not literally moving. They appear to be moving because the eye is seeing the whole. They're seeing the big picture, right? So we're seeing the lights on the tree as a whole. And so when those individual lights move, we don't see them as individuals first. We see them as animation. And then, if we spend a minute and start to observe, we then begin to notice that they're individual lights going off in succession. There is no actual movement. And he recognized this, and that's when he began to realize that we see the big picture first. Okay, and so one of the things we want to do is just start to look at some of these Gestalt principles, and I'll show you some examples. And here's one already. Most of these principles can be explained quickly, but others require a deeper study to really understand. And we're not going to get into them in great depth. We're going to get into the principles and elements of design. So, do you see a figure in the image? I see Batman, and I can't unsee Batman now that I've seen it. It's not really Batman. It's the my mind, and your mind probably say, okay, that black object is a hole, and you begin to then look closer, and you look at the pieces, and then you begin to say, okay, wait a minute, there's not really a person there. Nobody painted a person there. It's just how the ink on the page appears to my mind or to my eye. And that is the basis for what Gestalt is about. Okay, I'm going to stop this video here, and we will continue in the next.